Right now, there's a plot underway that will not only cause the US dollar to drop dramatically in value, but will send shockwaves through the world monetary system. It's real, and it's something you need to know about because it could seriously threaten your own financial future. I know, this might sound a little extreme, but let me explain. Hearing me out might just save or make you a lot of money. Every year, finance ministers and central bank governors from 19 countries around the world, commonly referred to as the G20, gather to discuss key issues in the global economy. Typically, the G20 summit is about as interesting and exciting as watching grass grow. Perhaps that's why, hoping few were paying attention, two former communist adversaries selected a recent G20 meeting in London to announce a plan that, unbeknownst to the rest of the world, had been secretly brewing for years. If you understand how this plan works and the 3 ways to exploit it, you'll be among the few to turn crisis into profits. It all started back in 2003. Deep behind the shadow of Chairman Mao's mural, communist insiders in China began to worry about the safety of their massive U.S. holdings, which, at the time, were around $403 billion, almost 25% of China's GDP. With U.S. military spending topping $404 billion borrowed dollars, plus a $3.9 trillion national debt and careless monetary policies, the Chinese forecasted that the United States was on its way to destroying the dollar. So the Chinese did what any sane investor would do. They devised a plan to protect their assets, and they started with 1,000 tons of gold. The first part of their plan unfolded recently when China shocked the world by revealing that they control over 33.89 million ounces of gold for monetary purposes. That's an increase of 75% in Chinese gold holdings over the past 6 years. By making its purchases through the State Administration of Foreign Exchange instead of the People's Bank of China, China managed to accumulate more than 1,000 tons of gold without anyone even raising an eyebrow. And then came the shocking G20 announcement. After months behind the scenes maneuvering, the Chinese and Russians, along with several of their crony nations, have proposed dumping the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. On the surface, the communists referred to their proposal as simply a practical adjustment in currency, but it's much more than that. They're scared to death that the continued stupidity of the United States government could bankrupt them. These understated comments by Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao at a recent news conference paint a more accurate picture. We have lent a huge amount of money to the U.S. Of course, we are concerned about the safety of our assets. To be honest, I am definitely a little worried. As the Wall Street Journal reported, China's call to replace the dollar as the world's standard reflects developing nations' growing unhappiness with the U.S. role in the world economy. Can you really blame them? After all, the dollar is on the verge of collapse, and it is very likely that the mass printing of currency throughout the world will cause a spike in inflation. The result is that we could soon see the dollar collapse by 20% or even 30% of its current value. And that means your life savings could be about to take a serious hit unless you take action now. Everything you've saved and worked hard for could be virtually wiped out, and your plans for a comfortable retirement a distant memory. But aren't we in a recovery? The Chinese aren't buying it, and neither should you. The recent run-up of the stock market may have some drinkers of the government's Kool-Aid convinced that everything is fine and the recovery is well underway. But the truth is, it won't last. In fact, a close look at the facts reveals that the latest claims of progress are just more whitewashing of the truth. For example, some banks are now reporting profits, but 293 banks have collapsed since July 2008. Compare that to a total of 29 bank failures in the prior 8 years. Many predict total bank failures will exceed 1,000 before this crisis is over. We're told we're out of the recession and adapting to a new normal, but the truth is things continue to get worse. Income tax receipts are falling and businesses are afraid to hire. Quarterly profits are more from cutbacks and layoffs than from increased sales. $3.5 trillion is sitting in money market accounts supposedly ready to be spent and invested, but Americans just aren't buying. Personal bankruptcies are rising every month. 36 million Americans, almost 1 in 8, receive food stamps, a record high for the country. Job losses continue. Even if you accept government numbers, unemployment is essentially unchanged. And as the Associated Press reports, the Great Recession has eliminated 8.4 million jobs. That's the most of any recession since World War II as a proportion of total payrolls. Home prices in some parts of the country appear to be stabilizing, but in reality, the Wall Street Journal reports that foreclosures are still rising at a rate of 1 every 13 seconds. The average new home has been on the market for 12.9 months. It would take at least 2 years to absorb current vacancies. The truth is, the U.S. economy is a house of bailout cards. No matter how neatly disguised by the government's smoke and mirrors, it's a house destined to collapse. When it finally does come crumbling down to reality, the Chinese are not about to let their massive U.S. holdings, now more than $1.6 trillion, be taken down with it. They want to back their investments with something more reliable, and so do you. There are 3 things you can do right now to weather the coming financial storm.